Very warm welcome to everyone to today's 1.1 session. My name is Els, and we have been running these sessions for over a year now. We started with these sessions about a year ago, and the thought came as several of us at one point are meditating on a regular basis. Why not to share some of these thoughts and ideas with a wider audience? And that's how the project was born. What we do is every week we invite experienced meditators and we ask them to share their thoughts on a particular topic. And today I'm very pleased to welcome Anna from Lebanon, who will be talking about Plato's Allegory of the Cave and its connection with Raja Yoga meditation. Anna was born and educated in Greece. She holds a BA in philosophy from the University of Athens, and she teaches Greek literature, philosophy, and psychology. Anna's spiritual journey started in 1987, and she has helped establishing centers in the Middle East and also in Greece. I know that she ran the meditation center in Thessaloniki for many years. She is currently the director of the meditation center in Lebanon, and she's based in that country now. Before the pandemic, Anna used to travel internationally to run seminars, and I assume they're still going on via Zoom. Topics like spirituality and science, education and values. And Anna is very passionate about exploring the human psyche, the human consciousness, and also how she can help other people to find more inner peace and calm. So I'm very pleased to welcome Anna, and I'm handing over to you now.
So, good morning and lots of love and light from the mountains of Lebanon. Thank you, dear Els, for the introduction, and many thanks to the organizing team behind the scenes. And also many thanks to all of you for your time and your participation. So let us start with a brief bit of background. So the Allegory of the Cave, which is probably the most famous single passage in the history of Western philosophy, and it is definitely of timeless value. In around 380 or 90 BC, Plato is the most famous student of Socrates and obviously a great admirer of his teacher. So now Plato's Cave appears in the 7th out of the 10 books of the Republic. Republic is a long dialogue dealing with justice. All the work of Plato is in the form of dialogues, if not all, most of the work. So Plato's cave is an allegory, and allegory is a kind of story. And like any allegorical story, the characters or the events in the story represent, that is, they stand for something real. So in the case of there is a one-to-one relationship between the story and the corresponding reality. So Socrates is without a doubt a historical person. He is a stone cutter by trade, but a philosopher by vocation. And he's the main character in this dialogue and in most of the dialogues of Plato. And he is used by Plato as a vehicle to put forward his own ideas. So we have no reason really to believe that this dialogue happened. So Socrates now in this dialogue with Relafkon, there's a dialogue between Socrates and Relafkon. Relafkon is the brother of Plato. So he's highlighting the effect of education or the absence of education on our understanding of the world and our own nature. So how education influences our understanding of the world and nature. So Socrates starts off describing a strange image. He asks Lafcon, and I am asking all of us to visualize, to picture the following image. So now, beings living in an underground cave with an entrance which is long and open to the light, and behind the back of these human beings, kind of prisoners, the cave dwellers, live from earliest childhood with their neck and legs bound in chains. So they have to stay all their life where they are, looking only ahead of them, prevented by the chains from turning their heads around. They can't see themselves, they can't see each other. So they have light from a distant fire that is burning behind them and above them. Now, between the prisoners at the higher level and the fire, so between the fire and the prisoners at the higher level than the prisoners, there is a path along which we now picture a long wall that has been built like the screen that hides the people when they give a puppet show, and above which they make the puppets appear. Along the length of the wall, people carry all sorts of manufactured objects. For example, statues of people, animals made of stone and wood and all kinds of material, and they project these objects above the wall. So I hope the image is clear. We have the prisoners sitting chained. In front of them we have the wall of the cave. Behind them we have the fire, and between the fire and them we have this wall and this screen, and as people pass hidden by the wall, they hold these manufactured objects in front of the screen. So those objects, those statues, have their shadows cast on the wall in front of the prisoners. So the prisoners all their lives see nothing else except the shadows of these statues, which are not even the real things. They're just statues of the real things that exist outside the cave. So, as you would expect, some of the people would be speaking and others would be silent. So the ones who speak make sounds appropriate to the statues. So the prisoners think that the sounds come from the shadows. So when Lafcon says to Socrates, a strange picture and strange prisoners, Socrates replies, not more strange than us. So from the beginning we know that we are these prisoners. So these prisoners have never seen of themselves or of one another more than the shadows cast on the wall of the cave, but also only the shadows of the statues, which in any case are not the real things. And if they would be able to converse between them, what they would do, they would just try to name these shadows in their attempt to make sense of what they see. So there are really many details that one can stay with, but we just give the very essence, just for you to know. Sometimes this presentation can be of 2 or 3 days, presenting it but also interpreting it, and it's really very helpful and very relevant to what is happening to us now, these times, these days, although this was said 2,500 years back. So now we are not told how, but one of the prisoners gets released and is compelled to stand and turn around and look towards the light of the fire that is so bright to his eyes that are adjusted to the darkness, that the light turns to be a very painful experience for him. And so he's so dazzled that he cannot even see distinctly the things whose shadows he would see before. And so he is told by the person who released him that these things that he sees now, not very clearly, however, that they are more real than the things he was seeing all his life, and that what he was seeing all his life is a sheer illusion. So the released prisoner finds this insane. He can't accept it. He says, how is it possible? I spent all my life in an illusion. And then he is reluctantly dragged out of the cave in the real world, where in the presence of the sun, for the first time in his life, he can't stand the light of the sun. You can imagine how disturbing this must be, except that his eyes start to adjust. So in the beginning he sees the shadows of the trees, and then reflection of objects in the water, but in the real world, outside the cave. And then he will gaze to the objects themselves. First he sees the shadows, then the reflections in the water of the real objects, then the objects themselves, and then he will gaze upon the stars, and finally he will see for the first time the sun itself. Not a reflection of it, but in its proper place, and for the first time reflecting on the sun. So then he remembers the kind of wisdom of his fellow prisoners who are busy honoring each other in the cave for who is predicting which shadow is coming next. That's how they would spend their time, thinking that this is clever and that they deserve to be honored because of this cleverness. And so as he enters the cave to share with them what he revealed, big revelation. Now he himself can't see clearly, because in the same way he couldn't see it coming from darkness to the light, similarly coming from light to the darkness, his eyes in the beginning cannot see. And when his fellow prisoners ask him to see the shadows and which one is coming, and to predict and play the game, he can't. So their fellows, the prisoners, thinks that something has happened to him, and actually they may find him even dangerous, and they may even want to kill him. And here Plato refers to Socrates, who was who was sent to death actually. So let us share just a few thoughts and some reading to this really very, very amazing image that Plato, who was metaphysical, was able to grasp such a long time ago and so relevant to our times. So basically, Plato speaks about two worlds. One is the world within the cave, and the other one is the world outside the cave. And the world in the cave is a world of appearances, of illusions. And what I came to understand when I started practicing Raja Yoga meditation, and actually this is the reason why after quite a few years I'm still here, is because then in my academic studies, when I first heard about the allegory, the Plato's allegory of the cave, I can not only understand much better now, but also find it useful in my practical life, because I always wondered when I entered the world of philosophy, what is the point of knowing all these ideas and high standards when I cannot use them in my practical life. So what I came to understand now and what I can use in my practical life is that the cave is the one world, the physical world, the world of the senses, the world that we perceive constantly, and the world outside the cave is a mental world, a world of thoughts, a world of things. It is an invisible world. So, for Plato, it was very clear that this physical world of the senses that attracts our attention, reasoner's attention is constantly on the shadows cast on the wall. So, what is clear is that this physical world is a world of appearances. So our senses constantly are exposed to this world. Only our attention is grasped, but we create thoughts, opinions, interpretations, and what we experience is the appearances, but not only as appearances. We can't see that this is something that appears, that comes and goes, that is perishable, because everything in this physical world changes, has an end. So everything that comes in front of our senses is temporary, and it's also temporary shapes of matter. That's why we call it appearance. It's not what we really see. Like a house, it's not really a house, but molecules and atoms and photons coming together in a certain way, and this appears to be a house or a tree or a human body. So it's an appearance. So not only what we see is not real, but also the way we interpret it is very subjective according to our own clarity or lack of clarity, according to our own background. So we are 2 times removed from reality, because this physical world most of us consider as real when it's not real, it's just temporary appearances, but at the same time the opinions we have, the conclusions and interpretations make things more confusing, less real, because we create stories upon the story of the images that come in front of us. So what we come to understand also through the wisdom of Raja Yoga, but also the personal practice, is that behind this physical world, in other words, behind the cave, there is a real world. And the real world is the world of the ones who observe the world. So when the prisoner came out, in fact, Plato says that the one who comes out is the soul. He believes in the existence of the soul, and he says that the spirit is the one who is real and exists, observes, who watches the appearances of this physical world. So, as I said earlier, it's really a very long discussion. Maybe another time we have the opportunity to go into more depth. But the concept will become clearer through some time together in reflecting. That is, I will share some thoughts along these lines, and these thoughts will be slower, so that we will have the time to feel these thoughts stand for, not just ideas and concepts, but just to confirm through our own seeing their reality, to see if it is really like this or not, if really this physical world is just appearances and just a stage, as we often say, a theatrical stage. And we are the actors that are here playing, but very much trapped, giving constantly our attention to this physical world at the cost of the true reality, which is beyond the stage, which is beyond the cave. So let us spend some quality time with ourselves. And this is an invitation to, first of all, relax physically, find a comfortable position for the body. If taking some deep breaths helps the relaxation of the body, this is also great. And be as much as possible. And as we sit quietly, we aim to create clarity within us, to see things as they are. And in this quiet time, even from the very beginning, like now, in these few seconds of silence, we realize that we have spent all our life giving our attention to this physical world, what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we touch. Our attention and our mind constantly create thoughts about the world out there, the world of the senses. And every time we become aware of an object or of a story, when we hear stories about what's happening in this physical world, we don't stay there, but we expand with our mind. We start interpreting everything. Stories. And so, most of the people in the world live their lives in this way. Stories in their mind upon stories for the story that is enacted in front of us, what we call physical world, or what we used to call life, thinking that this physical world is life. So we now decide, even if it is for a short time, even if it is not for many minutes, but even if it's for a few seconds, for 1 minute, to come out from this physical experience, from this cave. In other words, to give our attention to what Plato would call real world, and what the experience of many of us is, that there is an invisible world beyond the physical senses, this mental world, things which are all invisible. So we give our attention now to this, in other words, inner world. It's been there. Except our attention was drawn to the physical world. So now we ask ourselves, where do all of these thoughts and feelings come from? There must be a source to them. So we give our attention to this source, and it helps perhaps to visualize something like a star. So when we come out of the physical world and the awareness of this body, we come to see that we are the source of this inner invisible world of thoughts and feelings. Feelings so far were connected to the physical world at the cost of the true self. The self has been ignored. We now gently give our attention to this invisible being, and as the thoughts become slower and we have less thoughts about the cave, about the physical world, we start discovering silence. Within this silence there is security, there is happiness for no reason. And there is this realization, like for the prisoner who came out of the cave, that the real world does not need the shadows, is beyond the shadows. The real world is the qualities that were associated. In our case, we associate security with a house, we associate happiness with people or money or different associations for each one. Exist within the self, independently from the physical world. And the sun that the prisoner saw when he came out of the cave is the source, the principle before anything else. So we now are able to see the sun of truth in silence. Cave, free from the physical world. So regularly in our everyday life, every 1 hour, just spend 1 minute putting down this physical world of images, and we'll be amazed with the wonder that we'll discover within the self. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. This was really a very interesting topic. And I wish I could come for a 3-day training with you on this topic to further explore it. It's really interesting to see how often we live in an illusion and seeing the shadows, thinking they are real. So it's really interesting. Thank you so much. So we have actually all the recordings from all the previous sessions available on YouTube. I think there must be more than 60 now over the last year. So you're more than welcome to go and have a look. And if you think it might be helpful, you can also share these resources with your colleagues and friends. So for next week, Friday, we have another international speaker, and that will be Marion Muse from Cologne in Germany. And she will be talking about inner well-being in a working environment. So again, a warm welcome to everyone. If you want to join us next week, Friday, again, 9 in the morning. And thank you all for joining us today. And a special thank you to Anna, who joined us from Lebanon. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Bye-bye.
Bye.